Hello, this is the Unit 2 test review. I'm just going to verbally go over each of these items from our cognition unit. First, we have semantic versus referent encoding. So when creating new memories, semantic refers to encoding based on understanding the actual meaning of something. Self-referent is encoding it because it relates to ourself. Semantic encoding is also the strongest type of encoding. It's also known as deep encoding versus shallow encoding, which is based on phonetics. Chunking is an encoding technique where you're able to increase the amount of information encoded by breaking it into smaller or into other parts. So for example, we chunk phone numbers. Instead of saying 97261735535 for the school's phone number, we chunk it into 972-617-3535. Rehearsal is another encoding technique in which you repeat information over and over until it makes it to your short-term memory, and then in your short-term memory you can rehearse it, repeating it again to get it into long-term memory. The capacity of memory stores, our three main memory stores are sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. The capacity of sensory memory is essentially unlimited. You can take in tons of sensory information from the environment around you. However, the time it is there is very, very limited, just seconds. The capacity of short-term memory is 7 items plus or minus 2, and that's only for about 30 seconds. And the capacity of long-term memory is also essentially unlimited. It's just the challenge of being able to retrieve those memories. The components of working memory, I pulled up a picture for this one, if I can find it. Here it is. Those were those terms like central executive system. The central executive system is thinking about, or its job is to help you divide your consciousness and how much energy you're going to devote to different tasks. The phonological loop is when you're basically rehearsing or repeating things in your mind on a loop. Visual spatial sketchpad is when you're imagining or visualizing in your mind something, like looking at the clothes in your closet, trying to visualize an outfit. And then the episodic buffer is what is kind of making the decision of what's going to go on to long-term memory, or to short-term memory from sensory memory, and to long-term memory from your short-term memory. But all of that is part of the working memory, which is also called short-term memory. The multi-store model of memory is the idea that we have sensory memory, short-term memory, which is also called working memory, and long-term memory. State-dependent memory versus mood-congruent memory. This has to do with memory retrieval. State-dependent memory says that you can recall memories easier when you are in the same state, like state or location, think more like location, as when you form the memory. This goes with the scuba diving example, where when the scuba divers learned the list underwater, if they tried to recall the list while they were also underwater, they did better than if they tried to recall the list while they were on the boat. Mood congruent is the same concept, that you'll recall memories better from when you were in the same mood as before. So if you're in a sad mood, you're more likely to recall other times when you were also sad. Infantile amnesia is just the idea that we do not have conscious memories from before about the ages of 2 to 4 years old, or about 3 years old. That the way the brain processes and stores memories, we just don't have consciousness of memories from that early. The misinformation effect was studied by Elizabeth Loftus. If you'd watched the TED Talk, and she talked about Titus and the guy who was falsely accused of the crime, the misinformation effect is the idea that incorrect or misinformation can be incorporated into memories, and it can cause false memories. So when someone's asking you about an incident, other information that had happened between that incident and when you're talking about it could change your memory, including things that you heard other people say, things that you'd watched on the news, even memories from like past movies, and also your own biases can cause your memories to be false. That's the misinformation effect. Serial position effect has to do with memory recall when it comes to lists. The serial position effect says that where an item is on the list affects how it's remembered. And that includes the primacy and the recency effects. The primacy effect says that we remember stuff at the beginning of a list more easily because you have rehearsed it multiple times. So if you've been repeating that list in your head, the stuff at the beginning of the list, you just repeated it a little more often. The recency effect says that you remember things at the end of your list because it is still in your short-term memory. It's the most recent information. Source monitoring error says that you cannot recall where the memory originated from or where the information came from. So, for example, if you heard some juicy gossip or tea, but you think that one friend told it to you, but in fact a different friend told it to you, that would be a source monitoring error. Ebbinghaus is referring to Hermann Ebbinghaus, who did a lot of the early studies on memory. His first studies were the ones where he memorized nonsense syllables to show that when you memorize something, it takes fewer and fewer repetitions and less time to relearn it later. He also studied the forgetting curve, where he showed that when we learn stuff, if we're not using it regularly, we forget it very quickly, and then we only retain about 20 to 40% of that information later on. Proactive versus retroactive interference. These both have to do with problems with memory recall. Proactive interference. Proactive says that you cannot remember new information. Pro means new. So you cannot remember new information because the old information is still interfering. So this is like at the very beginning of the school year, me as a new teacher, I don't remember my new students' names yet because the old students' names are still fresh in my brain. Retroactive says you can't remember the old information because the new information is still interfering or is now interfering. So when you get a new cell phone, you forget your old phone number. You can't remember the old because now your new phone number is what you remember. Retrograde and anterograde amnesia both have to do with memory loss due to some type of brain damage or injury. Retrograde, think retro is old, so retrograde, they cannot recall their old memories. Antero means after, so anterograde amnesia means they're not able to form new memories. Repression is a term coined by Sigmund Freud, and it's the idea of forgetting because memories have been pushed unconsciously into the unconscious mind, usually because of trauma. The hippocampus and the cerebellum, when it comes to long-term memories, the hippocampus is processing explicit long-term memories, things like semantic and episodic and flashbulb memories, and the cerebellum is processing implicit memories, so procedural and conditioned memories. Or muscle memory type stuff. So explicit versus implicit. Explicit memories are processed by the hippocampus, and those are memories that you can consciously recall. So semantic information, so this also goes with number 18. Semantic information like knowing that the hippocampus is the part of the brain that processes long-term memories, that is a semantic memory. Another explicit memory would be episodic memories, so memories of your own life. Like I remember that for dinner we had tacos from Rosa's tonight. That's an episodic memory. An implicit memory is processed by the cerebellum, and that's muscle memory. So muscle memories include procedural memories, like knowing how to tie your shoe. Like you wouldn't necessarily be able to describe it, but you could just do it. But it could also be conditioned memories, like flinching every time somebody snaps their fingers. If in the past, every time somebody snapped their fingers, they also pulled your ear. That could be an implicit memory that was conditioned to you. So we did semantic and episodic. Retrospective and prospective. Again, retro is old. Pro means forward. So retrospective memories are any memories of the past, and prospective memories are forward memories. Like I need to remember to unlock the test tomorrow morning. Functional fixedness is when a person tends to get stuck in their belief that there's only a certain way to use an object. So for example, thinking that the only way to use a cinder block is to build a wall. But instead, a cinder block could also be used as something to make a bookshelf, or it could be used as a way to prop a door open. But coming up with alternative uses for something is called overcoming functional fixedness. Algorithms and heuristics are both ways to solve problems. The algorithm is the systematic, formal, long way, following the directions step by step. It's how computers solve problems by considering every possibility. A heuristic is a shortcut or a general rule of thumb. Two types of heuristics or shortcuts, the representative and the availability heuristics. The representative says you're making your decision by basing the information or comparing the information with a prototype in your mind. So if two of your teachers, if somebody told you out of your two teachers that one of them played college basketball, your representative heuristic would say, okay, well, I'm going to guess that the one who's taller was probably the college basketball player, because that matches a prototype in your mind that a basketball player is tall. That's the representative heuristic. Availability heuristic, you're basing your decision off of information that is most easily available or recent to you. So when deciding where you want to go to college, maybe you have an uncle and a cousin and one of your teachers all went to Oklahoma State University. So that information, you hear it all the time. That information is easily available to you. So that influences your decision on where to go to school. The gambler's fallacy and the sunk cost fallacy. Gambler's fallacy is where you falsely believe that your chances or the odds of something go up because it hasn't happened in a long time. So if the example we always use is flipping coins. If you flip a coin and 9 times in a row it's heads, so then on the 10th flip you're thinking, okay, my odds have gone up. It's got to be tails this time because it hasn't been tails in a long time. That's incorrect. It's still going to be a 50-50 chance. There's only 2 options it could be. The sunk cost fallacy is the idea that you should keep working on a task or keep investing in something because you have already invested so much time or energy into it, when realistically it would be better to stop where you are if you're no longer getting any benefit from it. An achievement versus an aptitude test. An achievement test is measuring what should have already been learned. So for example, this test, the Unit 2 Cognition test, will be an achievement test, making sure that you have achieved an understanding of all the information in Unit 2. An aptitude test is a forward working test. It's predicting future success or how well you'll do on a future task. Standardization, reliability, and validity, all of these have to do with creating quality tests. Standardization has 2 meanings. Standardization means that you gave everybody the same directions, the same time, that they took the test under the same environment or method. But standardization also means that the test was given to a representative sample ahead of time, and that allows you to compare the scores, and it gives the scores more meaning. Reliability tells us that the test is consistent, whether it's reliable from each time the test is taken, like class period to class period, that could be retest reliability, or split half reliability, that the first half of the test, the question's difficulty is comparable to the second half of the test. That could be split half reliability. Reliability doesn't guarantee that a test is good. It just means that it is consistent, because remember we talked about something could be consistently bad. Then validity is asking, does a test measure what it is supposed to measure? Is it a good measure of knowledge? Types of validity, we had 3 that we talked about in class. Content validity says that it includes information that's supposed to be on there. So my test tomorrow should only have information from Unit 2 on cognition, and that would be good content validity. Predictive validity, which is also called criterion-related validity, says that the test is a good measure of a future skill. So for example, if I give you an AAQ, an article analysis question in psych, and you make a perfect score on it every time, and then later on the AP exam, you don't do well on any of the AAQs, that would tell us that the AAQs I gave you had poor predictive validity. You want it to have to predict later good success. And then the third type was construct validity. Constructs are things that are abstract or difficult to describe or measure. For example, intelligence, happiness, depression, different talents. So the way to measure how good construct validity is by comparing it to other measures, other tests that have already been established. And so if you're measuring happiness on a new test, then you would compare it to the results of happiness on 3 other established tests. Fluid versus crystallized intelligence. Fluid is being able to adapt to new situations, be creative, come up with new ideas. Fluid intelligence tends to grow as you age until you hit about middle age, about your 40s, and then fluid intelligence declines. Crystallized intelligence is all your accumulated general knowledge, and that grows for your entire lifetime. The Flynn effect is the idea that the overall average IQs in developed and industrialized countries have been increasing due to a variety of environmental factors like better schooling, parents who are more educated, increased access to information. Reaction ranges is a theory that the environment sets a range on potential IQs. So in environments that are very enriched, people tend to be at the higher range of their potential IQ, whereas in environments that are very deprived, people tend to be at the lower range of their potential IQ. Sternberg's triarchic theory said that there's 3 types of intelligence: practical intelligence, which is like real life street smarts; analytical intelligence, which is like what would be tested on an IQ test; and then creative intelligence. Accommodation versus assimilation. This has to do with schema development, particularly in children. Assimilation is the idea that you have schemas, just a few schemas when you're little, and you blend everything into those. So our example was a child has a schema for dog is an animal that's furry and has 4 legs. So any other animal they come across, like a cat or a horse, they're going to call doggy. Accommodation is when they adapt that schema to be more detailed. So as the child now understands more of what a cat is, they have accommodated their schema for dog to be cat. So 4 legs, furry, and it meows. That would be accommodation for cat. Priming has to do with memory retrieval. It's the idea that all of our memories are together in sort of a web. So when you hear one term, it triggers the idea for another. So if I say broom, that may make you think of a witch, because a witch could ride a broom. And then that may trigger the movie Wicked, or it may trigger The Wizard of Oz. Broom instead could trigger or prime you for chores, and then you think of mopping and sweeping. So priming is the idea that one idea can lead to others. And then finally, framing is how you present information in a way, and it influences the understanding or the perceptions of the listener. So for example, if we say, oh my goodness, the dropout rate at Red Oak High School is that 2% of students drop out. That sounds like maybe 2% is really high, but if instead we focus on 98% of students graduate, then that makes it sound more positive. All right, that's Unit 2 review.